You're standing barefoot on sand that's still warm with blood. The roar above you isn't thunder, it's 50,000 voices, and they're chanting something you can't understand. Your hands are shaking, not from cold. The woman beside you is wearing white linen, clean and ceremonial, and when her eyes meet yours, you both know exactly what's about to happen. This isn't a nightmare. This was scheduled. This had a budget. Before we go deeper, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. It amazes me every single day that a story this dark, from so long ago, can reach people across every continent who still want to understand what we're capable of. The year is 112 AD. Emperor Trajan has just returned from Dacia Modern, Romania, with the largest haul of war prisoners Rome has seen in generations. 50,000 people, maybe more. Entire villages emptied. Families marched across Europe in iron chains, their feet blistering on Roman roads built by slaves who came before them. Trajan doesn't see prisoners. He sees opportunity. He declares 123 days of games to celebrate his victory. 123 days. That's not a festival. That's infrastructure. And among those 50,000 captives, Roman administrators kept a specific list: young women of marriageable age. The Latin term used in bureaucratic records is feminae et spectaculum matrimonial women, designated for matrimonial spectacle. If that phrase sounds clinical, that's because it was. This wasn't chaos. This was policy. Let me take you back to the hypogeum, the network of tunnels and cells beneath the Colosseum. The stone walls are damp. Scratched into them are prayers in languages that will die within a generation. Dacian, Thracian, Germanic dialects. Some of the carvings are still fresh. You're a warrior. 3 months ago, you fought Roman legions in the forests of your homeland. You lost. They didn't kill you then. They saved you for this. A woman is pushed into your cell. You recognize her. She's from your village. Her name was spoken at festivals. She was promised to your brother before the invasion. Now she's here, and a Roman official is standing at the cell door with an interpreter. His voice is flat, bureaucratic. The crowd has voted. You will be married tonight, in the arena. If you refuse, you both die now. If you comply, you'll live to see tomorrow's games. Read that again. The crowd voted. This wasn't the cruelty of one mad emperor. This was participatory entertainment. 50,000 Roman citizens, merchants, mothers, senators, children, raising their hands, choosing which prisoners would be forced into these rituals, voting on it the way you might vote on which musician to hear next. Think about what that means about civilization. The guards lead you up the ramp. The sound of the crowd grows with every step, a physical pressure building in your chest. Then you emerge into the light, and the noise hits you like a fist. The afternoon sun blinds you. When your vision adjusts, you see them, tier after tier of faces. Some are eating, some are laughing, some are kissing. In the center of the arena, a priest waits on a raised platform. He's holding a scroll. This is going to be ceremonial. Here's what makes this especially sinister. Rome didn't just force compliance. They ritualized it. They created a perverse mirror of sacred Roman marriage rites, complete with priests, legal witnesses, and vows spoken in Latin. They needed you to participate in the structure of your own degradation, because violence alone wasn't enough. They wanted transformation. They wanted to turn sacred things obscene. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii, includes graffiti that mentions these spectacles casually, the way someone today might mention a concert. One fragment, preserved under volcanic ash, reads, Tres nuptias arena vitae heri, quella Germanica restit it. Turba amavit. Saw 3 arena marriages yesterday. The German girl fought back. Crowd loved it. Read that again. The German girl fought back. Crowd loved it. Resistance wasn't just expected, it was part of the entertainment value. The more human you remained, the better the show. The priest begins speaking. You don't understand Latin, but you understand ritual. He's reciting marriage vows. The crowd quiets to hear the words. The woman beside you is shaking. You're both standing on sand that was raked clean an hour ago to cover the blood from the morning's animal hunts. Above you, spectators lean forward with the same interest they showed during the leopard fights earlier. The priest gestures. You're supposed to take her hand. Here's the psychological architecture that should terrify you. By forcing prisoners into a formalized ceremony, Rome wasn't just inflicting violence. They were engineering complicity. Every second you don't resist, you're choosing survival. Every gesture you make toward completing the ritual, you're participating. That choice, death now or degradation first, that's the machine. And it was designed by someone. Someone calculated this. You take her hand because the alternative is a spear through your spine. The crowd erupts. Then the priest gestures toward a small structure at the edge of the arena. It looks like a miniature house. The roof is decorated with flowers, real flowers. Someone was paid to arrange them. The door is open. That's when you understand the next part. The structure is called a cubiculum bedchamber. Archaeological excavations beneath several Roman amphitheaters, including sites in North Africa and southern Gaul, have found these small enclosed spaces. They share distinctive features. A raised stone platform serving as a bed, ventilation slits near the roof. And here's the detail that should haunt you. Acoustics designed to project sound outward. The architect who designed these chambers made deliberate choices to ensure that whatever happened inside could be heard by the audience outside. Think about that. This wasn't improvised cruelty. This was engineered. Someone sketched blueprints. Someone approved a budget. Someone tested the acoustics. You're led toward the cubiculum. The woman is crying now, silent tears that she can't wipe away because her hands are bound. The crowd is chanting rhythmically. The sound bounces off the marble tiers surrounding you, creating a wave of noise that feels alive. Roman sources document what happened next with the emotional detachment of technical manuals. The historian Marshall writes about these spectacles like theater reviews. He critiques the authenticity of the participants' reactions. He complains when prisoners show insufficient resistance. He is reviewing sexual violence the way a critic reviews a play. Inside the cubiculum, there's just enough light from the ventilation slits. The walls are limestone. There's fresh straw on the floor. Outside, the chanting continues. And here's what the historical record tells us. In fragments scattered across legal documents and administrative texts, the guards didn't leave. They stood outside with spears, ensuring what Roman legal language calls ceremonial completion. That's the actual phrase completio ceremonia, as if adding Latin makes it less obscene. The duration was timed. Romans used water clocks, clepsydry, to schedule different arena events. Gladiator matches, animal hunts, executions, and these. Everything had an allotted time frame. This wasn't spontaneous. This was on a program. Somewhere there was a schedule that read, Hour 6 Matrimonial Spectacles, Batch 3. Now here's what you need to understand about scale. Trajan's games in 112 AD lasted those 123 days. Later Roman sources estimate that approximately 10,000 prisoners died during this period. But death wasn't the only designation. Roman bureaucrats, with their obsessive love of categorization, tracked prisoners in different groups, those marked for immediate execution, those selected for gladiatorial training, those reserved for animal hunts, and those designated for ceremonies. The documentation is fragmentary. Much was deliberately destroyed in later centuries when Christian authorities wanted to sanitize Rome's past, but what survives is chilling. A papyrus fragment discovered in Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, dating to the 2nd century AD, contains what appears to be an expense ledger for an amphitheater. It lists supplies for ceremonial structures. The quantity suggests these weren't rare occurrences. Flowers for decoration, 2,000 stems per month. Straw for bedding, 50 bales per month. Maintenance of ceremonial chambers. Ongoing contract with local carpenters' guild. This was infrastructure. This had supply chains. Someone calculated the flour budget. Someone negotiated bulk rates on straw. Someone filed expense reports. The bureaucratization of horror. Here's what happened after. If you survived the ceremony, you were led back down to the cells. Tomorrow, you'd return to the arena, maybe to fight as a gladiator, maybe for execution, maybe for another ceremony. The uncertainty was strategic. It was part of the psychological destruction. Some prisoners lasted weeks in this cycle. Contemporary accounts mention experienced gladiators recognizing faces among the ceremony victims, people they'd seen before, forced to perform again and again. The repetition served a purpose. Every time you chose survival over death, you internalized a little more shame, a little more degradation. By the time you finally died and you would die, you'd already been hollowed out from the inside. That's the machine Caligula had refined decades earlier. That's what Trajan industrialized and scaled. Now let me show you something. This practice didn't die with Rome. When archaeologists excavated amphitheaters across former Roman territories, Gaul, Hispania, Britannia, North Africa, they found similar structures. The cubiculum chambers existed at multiple sites, with remarkably consistent dimensions. This wasn't unique to the Colosseum. This was exported policy, like aqueduct, engineering, or road construction. Everywhere Rome conquered, they built arenas. And everywhere they built arenas, they included these chambers. The blueprint traveled with the empire. In 2008, excavations beneath the amphitheater in Emerita Augusta modern Merida, Spain uncovered a chamber with scratch marks covering the walls. Among them, archaeologists identified carved words in what appears to be Lusitanian, a pre-Roman language. The translation is disputed, but one epigrapher suggests it reads, Devos mag bravum me fecit, gods make me brave. That prayer was carved by someone who knew what was coming, someone who had time to scratch words into limestone while waiting. Here's the question nobody wants to confront. How many people watched these spectacles? The Colosseum held 50,000. Major amphitheaters across the empire ranged from 15 to 30,000 capacity. These weren't secret rituals performed in dungeons. These were public events. Thousands bought tickets. They brought their families. They purchased snacks from vendors. They cheered. Then they went home and considered themselves the most civilized people on earth. That's the real horror. Not that evil exists, we know that, but that ordinary people in broad daylight, with full awareness, can normalize systematic cruelty and call it culture. The poet Juvenal, writing in the early 2nd century, mentions these spectacles in passing. He doesn't describe them as shocking. He describes them as boring. Another arena marriage, he writes dismissively. The crowd barely pays attention unless something unexpected happens. Let that sink in. The crowd barely pays attention. It had become so routine that people were bored by it. That's what should terrify you. Not the existence of cruelty, but its domestication, its transformation into background noise. Now here's what made Rome eventually stop. It wasn't morality. It wasn't Christianity, despite what later church historians claimed. It was economics. By the mid-3rd century, Rome's expansion had stalled. Fewer conquests meant fewer prisoners. The supply chain dried up. Additionally, gladiatorial training schools began lobbying. They wanted prisoners for fighters, not for ceremonies. A trained gladiator represented months of investment, specialized diet, medical care, training. They were assets. Random executions and rituals were wasteful. So the practice declined, not because anyone decided it was wrong, but because it became inefficient. The thing that stopped this wasn't human decency, it was resource management. Think about that. Here's what survived in the historical record. Most of what we know comes from 3 types of sources: literary references by Roman poets and historians, graffiti preserved in Pompeii and other sites, and legal documents discussing arena administration. The victims themselves left almost nothing. No letters, no memoirs, just scratch marks on cell walls and prayers carved in languages that died with their speakers. That silence is deliberate. Rome was extraordinarily good at documentation. They kept detailed records of everything: tax collection, military logistics, building contracts. But the interior lives of arena victims, that wasn't worth recording. Their humanity was erased through administrative indifference. In 2019, researchers using ground-penetrating radar discovered previously unknown chamber structures beneath the Colosseum's hypogeum. The Italian government halted further investigation, citing preservation concerns and respect for the site's dignity. But some archaeologists who worked on the preliminary survey gave anonymous interviews to academic journals. One described finding artifacts that suggested these chambers were used far more extensively than earlier documentation indicated. The scale may have been significantly larger. They wouldn't elaborate further. Even now, 2,000 years later, the full truth is still being managed. Here's what haunts me most. Somewhere in Roman history there's a structural engineer who calculated the optimal dimensions for those cubiculum chambers. Someone who did the mathematics on acoustic projection. Someone who tested different roof angles to maximize auditory clarity for the audience. That person went to work every day, probably had a family, probably took pride in his craftsmanship, and his job was architecting the spatial dynamics of public sexual violence. That person has no name, no memorial, but his designs were replicated across an empire, from Britannia to Syria. The perpetrators are anonymous. The victims are anonymous. Only the system remains embedded in stone. That's the lesson Rome tried to erase. Evil doesn't require monsters. It requires systems. And systems are built by ordinary people doing ordinary jobs with extraordinary consequences. The wedding night ritual wasn't the fevered dream of a mad emperor. It was policy. It had procedures. It had trained personnel. It had quality control. It was in every sense that mattered to Romans civilized. And that's why it matters that we remember it. Not to judge ancient Rome. By modern standards, that's easy and pointless. But to recognize that the machinery of dehumanization looks surprisingly normal from the inside. Those 50,000 spectators weren't demons. They were people. They loved their children. They wrote poetry. They valued philosophy and art. They built roads and libraries and legal systems. And they also paid money to watch human beings destroyed and called it entertainment. Both things were true simultaneously. That's the uncomfortable inheritance we carry from Rome. The cubiculum chambers beneath the Colosseum are gone now, collapsed or filled in over centuries. The arena is a tourist attraction. Millions visit every year. They take selfies. They imagine gladiator battles. Very few know about the wedding night rituals. That ignorance isn't accidental. It's a continuation of Roman policy. Even in death, even across millennia, the victims are denied witness. But the archaeological evidence remains. The graffiti survives. The scratch marks on cell walls can still be seen if you know where to look and someone lets you into the restricted areas. And in those marks you can read desperation. The depth of the grooves tells you how hard someone pressed, how long they worked, how important it was to leave some trace, some proof. That's what resistance looked like under empire. Not grand gestures, not heroic last stands, just scratching prayers into stone, knowing you probably won't survive to morning, but needing to leave evidence that you existed, that you were human, that this happened. In one cell beneath the Colosseum, there's a mark that looks like two hands reaching toward each other. It's crude, barely recognizable, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Someone carved that in darkness, with bleeding fingers, with almost no time. And 2,000 years later, it's still there. That mark outlasted the empire that tried to erase it. It outlasted the emperors, the priests, the architects, the guards. It outlasted the 50,000 voices chanting in the sun. All of that is dust now. But those two hands, reaching for each other in stone, remain. That's what survives. Not the power, not the glory, just the quiet insistence, carved in darkness, that love existed here, that humanity persisted, that someone refused to let the machine have the final word.